Welcome to Feeling Asian, a podcast where two Asians talk about their feelings. I'm Youngmi Mayer.
And I'm Brian Park.
And before we get to our guest, like always, we're going to do our Patreon shout-outs.
Yes. So for those of you listening, if you like the podcast, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/feelingasian. Youngmi and I offer different exclusive benefits, but any donation amount gets you a shout-out on the podcast where we guess who you are based on your name alone.
You can support our Patreon even if you don't like our podcast. You don't have to like it. You can just give us money.
That too. You know, if you are
Be chaotic.
If you're chaotic, or if you have a passion for spending your money frivolously, then support our podcast even if you hate it. And without further ado, our first shout out on the podcast goes out to, and I apologize if I am butchering your name, but it is Aichi Liu. Now, Aichi is spelled I-CHIH.
Brian proving once again
Ichi?
that Asians can do anything. Asians can mispronounce Asian names. Do you think this
Who
is
are
a
they,
Japanese?
Youngmi?
Who are they? I think the vibe that I get is we don't know. I'm getting a very young vibe from this person. Like high school vibe.
Like a young, forgettable high school student.
Brian, why'd you throw forgettable in there? That's just mean for no reason. I was like, oh, this person seems like a young person. Brian's like, and forgettable.
Because we spent the first 3/4 of our guests just being like, who are you? Who are they? What are they? Who are they? I think they're Japanese. Ichilu.
Yeah.
High school student. Wrestler Asian.
Wow. Okay.
Lives
That
in
was
Milwaukee.
confident. Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Wow, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Midwest Asian, really jacked, into wrestling.
Wow, I was getting
Cornbread.
Corn.
I'm getting way corn-fed.
Corn-fed. I thought you said cornbread. Cornbread.
I said cornbread.
Just saying words now. I was getting like private school Singapore and private school vibes, but I don't know.
Oh.
I think there's a pipeline.
You know
There's
what?
like a private school in Singapore to like Midwest school pipeline for Asians. Don't you feel that? That's true?
No. You are absolutely correct. Singapore American school grad,
Right.
pipeline to rich American boarding school, is this rising senior and has connections to Yale and is going to go to Yale next year.
Yeah.
That's Ichilu. Yeah.
By has connections
Ichi, I
to Yale, you
apologize.
mean,
I apologize for saying that you're a cornbread, whatever the hell that means. Please hire me next year when you drop out of Yale and start a startup company.
I feel like I was more right on this one, Brian. Who's
Absolutely.
the next person?
Our next shout out goes out to David Hong.
David Hong is
David Hong is heavy tech bro vibes for me.
Wow, Brian, you and I are so misaligned today. David Hong for me looks like kind of like Brian Park, like hot Asian, nice hair, like actor, like that's the vibe I got.
So David Hong is my mortal enemy then.
Yes, just somebody that reminds you of yourself you hate. That's saying a lot about you, Brian.
God. David, I don't even know who you are, but I hate you.
You feel competitive.
I am competitive with David Hong is honestly, I would say most of the acting auditions that I have not gotten have gone to people in Crazy Rich Asians, but every once in a while it'll be an actor who wasn't in Crazy Rich Asians, and that's David Hong.
He has Asian vibes.
Asian vibes. David Hong is just better at acting than me. He's hotter, more ripped. Again, I was misaligned. I projected tech bro because that's what I want him to be, but the truth is he is just a better version of me.
I feel like he's going to DM us and be like, I'm just a tech bro. Brian was right.
I'm a software engineer at Etsy, but
Brian
thank
should
you.
go with his gut. Brian is the actual psychic.
But in any case, David, thank you for supporting the podcast. And our last shout out goes out to Kayla De Leon.
I see a haircut. I see a hairstyle. Like curly bangs, like curled bangs, and like curly back hair. It's brown. She has brown hair. That's what
I'm so glad you went first because I saw purple hair.
Okay.
Kayla DeLon, scene kid in high school.
Wow.
Goth adjacent. Listened to a lot of emo pop punk music. She probably works as an audio engineer now. She tours with bands.
Did you say Vans, like the shoes?
I said bands, but a lot of the bands that she tours with probably do Vans Warped Tours, so
yeah,
interchangeable terms.
I'm seeing her as a very young person, like a 23-year-old person with like dark curly hair and like gold jewelry. That's what I'm seeing.
So like a hot New York socialite woman.
Why are you and I so off today, Brian? We're like not agreeing. Our psychic energies
I don't know, Young Mi. I don't know. Our psychic energies are off right now.
It's right here. Should I read one?
What does it say about our
this
psychic
is the
vibes?
one that I just pulled. I don't know what it means. It's a couple in a church with pentagrams. 3 of pentagrams. If any of our listeners know what that means. That's Brian and my tarot card.
Wow. So 5 pentagrams seems very evil because pentagrams, I think of the devil.
3 of pentagrams.
Yeah, I think that's just affirmation that our vibes are misaligned right now. But any case, DM us if we are in the ballpark of guessing who you are. Kayla, thank you for your donation. And once again, if you like the podcast, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/feelingasian. Young Mi, we were a little bit off on our psychic vibes today on the Patreon shoutouts, but I think we will be psychically aligned for our guest because they're so freaking awesome.
Are you kidding me? I'm so excited. No, I feel like this chaotic precedent has been set for our guest. I feel like it's going to be a lot of chaotic energy. Sorry, my cat is attacking my laptop. What's going on? No. And our guest is like extremely, extremely popular and has a huge fan base. And I feel like, oh my God, I feel like this is like some universe energy, I feel like, with the cat and the...
Young Mi, you're saying that it's universe chaotic energy, but you're honestly bringing 95% of all the chaos right now.
Sorry. But anyway, I'm so sorry. It's mostly actually my cat named Tonko. But he's gone now. I'm so excited for our guest, Brian. Let's introduce him and get this conversation on the road.
Let's do it. Listeners, you're in for a special treat. Our guest is so freaking talented and so amazing. He is a software engineer at Google, but you may know him for his YouTube channel, Joma Tech. However, you need to check out his new YouTube channel, Joma and NYC. Everyone, please give your ears for Jonathan Ma.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
What's up?
Hey. Thanks for having me. Oh my God. You know, I love getting introduced because it's always an ego booster. So yeah, we can do that again.
Wow. How was that introduction on a scale of 1 to 10? How'd I do?
Oh, we're not. Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's a 9.
Really?
You know, most of the time when I get introduced is yeah. So this is Jonathan. He works on the ads team. Yeah, you could take it away. Something like that. That's usually how I get.
We're not even done with the introduction. I was gonna add like probably one of the most internet popular people we've ever had on the show. Yeah.
Really?
The largest reach.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, I'm pretty sure none of your viewers know me, even if it seems like I have like a million subscribers, but most of them are in a very like small niche. So like, but yeah, I mean, if some of you guys know me, that would be pretty cool. But I mean, if it's David Wong from tech, then yeah, he might know me. But if it's
Yeah.
David Wong as an actor, then maybe not.
Yeah, our David Wong
And-
Patreon guys like
Yeah.
Joma. He's like, what?
Oh yeah.
Oh, thank God. How many episodes have been? 90? And finally a guest that I want to listen to for once.
Finally, somebody that I've heard of.
He's probably the guy that hates the show but still donates.
Yes.
Oh,
For
absolutely.
sure.
Because he's too busy making that tech money, and he's
Mm-mm-mm.
feeling a little bit altruistic. But in any case, Jonathan, thanks for joining us on the Feeling Asian podcast. And before we ask you about how you're feeling,
Brian, how
Young
are you
me.
feeling? Brian.
young me, how are you feeling?
No, Brian, how are you feeling?
I want to talk about two things unrelated.
Uh-oh.
First thing, no. So first thing I'm feeling is I'm a huge tennis nerd. I'm feeling super amped because we are recording this right after Novak Djokovic just won Wimbledon, which is his 20th Grand Slam. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but as a tennis nerd, huge tennis fan, I'm really excited because if you know anything about tennis, we are witnessing history. It is a historic moment. I don't know. It's just a crazy feeling to be able
Wow.
to relish and be present during this huge athletic achievement and probably know until I die, like there's probably going to be nothing like it to happen again. Like this is the greatest era of tennis right now. And we are witnessing someone who is establishing himself to be the best who has ever played tennis. And I think that's a cool thing. Regardless of what sport or whatever it is you're into, to be able to witness history like that and be passionate about it and be cognizant and aware that it's a huge privilege to be able to watch this unfold. It's super cool. Now,
Wow.
that's how I'm feeling because I'm amped. I'm super amped. However, the second thing that I'm feeling, it is, listeners, it's a little bit related to what I want to talk about just in general for this podcast episode, but I kind of I might feel this as a question to you, Young Me, too, where I feel a little bit stagnant in terms of my career. Like, do you ever get bored, Young Me? I feel like I do this a lot, and I usually frame it as a negative thing, but reframing it, I'm trying to reframe it as a positive thing. I think I get easily bored when it comes to career shit. And so I'm always looking for like a new challenge. And, I said I was on the cusp of like becoming a doctor, and then I switched to do comedy. And then, and even with this podcast, I enjoy it. I love doing it with you, but it's gotten to a point where we're good at it. We're comfortable in what we're doing. It's not this feeling of like flying by the seat of our pants, like we know what we're doing now. And so now that there's this like comfort, I feel a little bit, I guess, a little bit like stagnant, as in like, I need this new stimulation. I have a little bit more free time freed up. So what's like a new thing that I can do? Does that make sense a little bit?
Yes.
Like, I don't know. And
Definitely.
so rather than jumping to maybe like picking up a new skill that's adjacent to the thing I'm currently doing to like bolster the thing I'm doing currently. So for instance, like with this podcast, it might make sense to be like, oh shit, I have all this extra free time. Should learn how to be a better videographer because that's a skill that's going to really help this. I should do that. Like pick up a new skill. But my brain always goes into extremes where now, and I brought this up in the pandemic, now I'm like, maybe I do want to be a doctor again. And so I'm fielding this question to our listeners. If you know anyone who has gone to medical school late in their 30s, shoot me a DM. But yeah, that's a little bit how I'm feeling. I don't know. Is that chaotic? I feel like you're out of words right now. You're speechless.
No, I was gonna say I feel like this is a reoccurring theme with you. So I don't think it's chaotic. I don't think it's out of nowhere. And I'm like wondering what I can say to help you, because I feel like you have said it so many times now where I'm like, and I don't think it's I know you said late meaning you're not 19 or 21, but I don't think 31 is late for anything, period. Like, you have so much time and do you know what I mean? Like, and
right.
So if that's,
however,
like,
I get hard on myself because I don't know if it's me just getting bored easily or if I just give up too quickly on things, but it always seems as if, let's say it's a video game and I get 90% there, 90% completion. It's like my brain decides to switch with the remaining 10%. Do you know what I mean? Like, initially I took my MCATs. I was working for a vascular surgeon. Then I switched to comedy. Like, if I had just pushed through that extra 10%, I would be in medical school. But then with stand-up, like, I did that national NBC showcase. I was one of 10 comics selected. That's a huge deal. And then the remaining 10% left, I was like, I'm going to do a podcast. That's like more exciting. So it's like a new venture. So I start these new things, obtain a certain level of mastery
Success.
in it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts on this. Well, this is like, I have ADHD, and that's like an ADHD thing. Like, for some reason, the final last steps to completing but I'm talking about like a little project, like an essay that I have to like turn in for work, or a joke that just needs like tweaking to get perfect. Those are little tasks, but the bigger picture things, what I know about myself is, and it sounds like this is actually what's happening to you, is I am afraid of success. And the second I get success, I like abandon stuff. Like, does that make sense? Because a lot of people are like afraid of I feel like for me, if I succeed in something, then it's almost more painful, because it's like proves that I was always capable of succeeding, and I was beating myself up this entire time. It's almost like if I get it, then I have to admit that I could have always gotten it, and I was like fucking around for all my life, and that's the reason I wasn't getting it or something. The success thing for me is because, like, when I, as everyone knows, I've talked about this in the podcast a lot. Like, I had a childhood where my mom was very competitive with me in this like way that wasn't like maternal. It was almost like a peer. So whenever I did something well, she would punish me. So like as a child. So
oh shit. Yeah, I don't know because I'm curious, like, prior to comedy you were in the restaurant industry, and obviously when you started your first restaurant venture, it's exciting, it's new, you're like, holy shit, what are we doing? Like, let's just make something, and who knows, hopefully something comes of it. And then once you get to a certain level of comfort within that space, like, did you ever get like a wandering eye where you're like, okay, I'm pretty good at this, like, what else could I do? Or no?
Well, the restaurant thing was very different for me, because in that industry I wasn't doing it. It wasn't my thing. I was supporting my ex-husband. It was his thing. Like, he was the artist and the creative, and I was just supporting him, and it was like a safe place, because like no one ever thought of it as my thing. But like the thing, just, I think like what I'm hearing from you is it's hard to sit in your own success. Like, and I relate to you, Brian. Like, if I ever got like a big thing in stand up, like the NBC thing, like showcase, I'd be like, that, I don't know, that would like scare me, and then it would kind of make me stop in a weird way. And I don't fully understand why I do that, so I feel like I can't give you advice, but I all I can say is I know exactly how you feel.
That's how I feel. As you know, I've talked about this feeling before on the podcast, and it could just be a temporary thing. It's just something that crossed my mind. Maybe it comes from a place of self-examination, or maybe I do just want to be a doctor. who knows, you know? But
so you're worried
just putting that out there.
Yeah. So you're worried that the want that you have to want to be a doctor is coming from this like place of like you just trying to get away from doing the podcast or.
But that's the thing. I don't want to stop doing the podcast. I'm
Right,
just
right.
saying now that we're like have a operation in place and we know how this ship runs,
Mm-hmm.
I have this extra time to like pick up other skills or
Right.
try a new challenge, you know? And for me, it's like, okay, like my work feels stagnant, so why don't I shake things up? Maybe I should study for the MCAT and take it again. I don't know, you know?
Right.
I
love
like
how-
pain.
Brian's like, I have a little extra time on the weekends. Should I become a doctor? That's like, we're like, okay.
I'm a psycho. Enough about me. How are you feeling, young me?
How am I feeling? I'm feeling. Honestly, I like started. So I started doing stand up again, and I had like a good show, and now I'm back, baby. I'm a comedian because like I was sort of dragging my feet before, like I was like
Yeah.
really not wanting to do it, and I was
Right.
like. I guess it's like similar to you, Brian. It's like now that when I get on stage, I don't feel like I suck. Like I suck, but like I can see that the standard of performance.
When you said that, young me, you're like, I think you're afraid of being successful. I'm like, I didn't say that. I suck. Just want to go on the record for I suck.
You know, when I do stand up, I'm like, it's hard for me to be like subjective, but I'm like, this is like, or I mean, it's hard for me to be objective, but I'm like, okay, so this is like pretty good. This is pretty good, but like I'm shifting like the main theme of my jokes from race to being like a single mom. And so I'm writing a lot of jokes about being a single mom now, because like, you know, most
Yeah.
of my other jokes are focused on being Korean and like being biracial and white people, blah blah blah. But now that I'm like spending so much time writing about being a single mom, I'm realizing like how happy I am. And
Wow.
obviously, like what I realize as an adult is that happiness isn't like a state. It's like a very fleeting feeling. It's like, you know, sometimes you get like a little pang of sadness. Like throughout the day, you wake up and you feel like a million things every day. You know, sometimes you're happy,
Right.
sometimes you're sad. Maybe there's a traumatizing incident if you went through a breakup or somebody died where you're sad for a few days, but like for the most part every day is filled with these little ups and downs, you know? But like
Yeah.
when I look at my life and where I am so happy being a single mom. And I have so many thoughts about that because I'm writing so many jokes about it right now. But the main thought that I have about it is that I feel sort of like cheated and lied to by society. Because I feel like since I was a kid, like we're sort of fed this narrative, right? Like you're supposed to be married and have a bunch of kids. And as a woman, that's like where you're going to be happy. And even when I was a little kid, I knew that's not what I wanted. Even though obviously I have a son and I love him so much. And I feel like the life that I'm living now is exactly what I've always wanted. You know, like independence.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, having a kid, having an adult co-parent partner that is my friend and a partner, but not a romantic person, my ex-husband, and raising it like this is the life I would have chosen for myself if I knew that this was even an option. But I didn't even know this was an option. And so it's sort of like blowing my mind. Like I thought I was like an open-minded feminist, but in a lot of ways in the back of my head, I thought that this life that I lead right now is like wrong or bad. And I'm like just coming around to realizing that it's normal and nobody cares. And it's like, it's making me really happy. So that's like what's on my mind.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
I think it's really cool that like writing jokes and doing the stand-up is helping you conceptualize all of this stuff that's kind of rattling in your brain and, you know, helping you crystallize your feelings about it all.
Yeah, it's always weird because like I'll sit down and try to write jokes and then I'm like, oh, this is like now I'm thinking about my life, you know? Yeah.
Oh,
That's
I
how
think
I
I'm
feel.
gonna take after you. So when I go back into stand up, I am going to stop writing jokes about being an Asian American man and start writing jokes about what it's like to be successful, and I will be happy. And society makes me feel like I should feel bad for being successful.
No,
but
Brian, you're this is what you need to write about. You need to write about being a fucking hot man. Cuz that's like
oh yeah,
you never talk about
that
that.
is. I have written jokes about it, and it falls to deafening silence because in comedy, people are like, "Fuck you, dude! What, I don't want to listen to this."
So I'm hot. That's it. That's the
Oh.
punchline.
Oh my god, Jonathan, thank you for
Yeah.
listening to us talk about our feelings. How are you feeling, Jonathan?
I'm all right. I'm a bit nervous. You know, yesterday I couldn't sleep.
Whoa!
And I think it's because of this. I was having a hard time sleeping. Yeah, no. I kept waking up and then sleeping again, waking. So the quality of sleep was just not there, and like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I'm nervous though, but it is fascinating to hear your stories because you know, to be honest, my friends, or at least like the people around me in tech, are so homogenous that like it's quite refreshing to hear other people's stories. And I didn't realize how homogenous my friend groups were until like I listened to you guys. And yeah, it's fascinating. It's so interesting, like the different paths that you guys took. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm thinking about right now. And I guess I am nervous that I'm like, oh well, I have nothing to add. You know, it's just my life has just been kind of like carved for me, especially in the beginning. You know, just carved for me being a very normal Asian dude. You know, like model minority kind of thing.
Absolutely
right?
not. I think you're totally underselling yourself. And first and foremost, you joining us on this podcast and just being yourself is all that you need. Like, there is no script for like what you need to say. And I also want to add that it's all relative, honestly, because the whole life of a comedian or like a creative, that's super fucking homogenous too. Like, after being around total like creative types, now whenever I meet someone who comes from a tech background like yourself, that's so refreshing to me. Or I'm like, oh my god, so your junior year you did a software engineering internship at LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Oh wow. And then you got an offer after that, after you graduated? Tell me more. Like, please give me that stability that I so badly need in my life.
You don't have a cocaine problem? What? Sorry. Wait, what do you mean by your life was carved out for you? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of the time, especially in software engineering, it's the path is very linear and determined, right? It's like you go to school, you do a few internships, and everyone's goal in the beginning is to get into like a FANG company. FANG meaning like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, or one of these big companies,
Wait, was that
right?
word FANG?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like FANG. Yeah. So yeah, I'm surprised that you guys don't know the word, because like if I say it like, you know, at Google campus, yeah, they would immediately know what I'm
Facebook,
talking
FANG
about.
Amazon,
company.
So
Netflix,
Google.
Netflix
Google.
and
FANG.
Google,
Oh,
and then it spells FANG.
All right.
I've never heard
Yeah,
that.
like
Never.
So that's the thing. So everyone just wants to get into one of those companies, right? So then they just work. It's kind of similar to med school, right? It's slightly competitive, and then everyone just like learns the same thing, computer science or software engineering. And then they do one or two internships, and each internship they try to step up in terms of prestige, like in the job force. And then once they get into FANG, after a couple of years, they get like a slight existential crisis, saying, "Oh wait, I actually don't want to do this."
Oh wow.
And then they either quit and try to do a startup to kind of fill the void inside of them, or they do something very creative for like a few months and then go back to just working because it just makes way more money.
Wow.
And yeah, it's sad. Like it's hard to watch sometimes. It's hard to watch. And I'm fortunate enough that the creative side is a potential career as well, right? So I'm super fortunate there. But it also meant that I kind of sacrificed my progress in my actual career. Like, not my actual career,
Your
but like
tech
my
career.
engineering career, right?
I think a classic career dilemma for so many people is, deciding between, do I take a stable, well-paying job, or do I do something more creative that kind of fulfills me spiritually and it's far more risky? It's this balance between stability and creativity. And I feel like in your case, like you're doing both things at the same time. Like you're a software engineer at Google, but then you also are a YouTuber with over like 1 million subscribers. That's so fucking many people. And I just want to say, like, what that's basically 3 full-time jobs. Like you're working in tech, you're a YouTuber, but then you also, with YouTube, it comes like tons of self-promotion and marketing. And how, why, like, I don't even know where to begin.
Well, I mean, most of the time I answer that question with like, well, I can't just half-ass both so that you can like do both at the same time. But honestly, I think I just got like really lucky in terms of I found a team that was like pretty chill. Like it's not too many meetings. And also the fact that they kind of complement each other, right? The whole reason why my Joma tech channel succeeded was because I worked at these like prestigious big tech companies, right? So they kind of complement each other. And the fact that I worked on YouTube, when, for example, where I was working at Facebook and stuff like that, I always worked at their video platform, right? So I had a lot more empathy towards like creators, and I brought that empathy into work for, for like an analysis, because I was like a data scientist, so you do a lot of analysis. So it was a lot easier for me to do analysis if I know what I'm looking for, if I understand the users and stuff. So I would say they kind of complement each other. And then, I don't know, man. I guess like now that I think about it, I don't hang out a lot of people. Like I'm like alone a lot, like at home. So maybe that's why I have extra time. Like I have more time than other people to work on these things. And I've been doing that for so long that it's kind of like the norm for me to balance 2 things at the same time. But I think it wasn't easy getting here, because when I was working at Facebook, I did burn out from doing YouTube and doing my full-time job. And I was a way smaller YouTuber back then. I wasn't even at 100,000 subscribers, right? So the size actually helps. Like once you're big, you know that your audience won't leave as quickly, But it's all in your head though. You always think like, oh, I need to post once a week. But that's kind of a myth, in my opinion, which is how I kind of like designed my life, or like I kind of crafted this life for myself where I can chill, you know? And I think that's way more important long term. Like, maybe in the short term you could, I don't know, make more money, get more views, get more whatever if you work a lot harder.
Right.
But if that's not sustainable in the long term, it's not worth it.
Like,
so after that,
because like when you were, it's very evident that you're very driven, you're very ambitious, and like when you were studying computer science or like some software engineering related thing, and you had your eye set on getting your foot in the door at these FANG companies. Did you still want to do something creative? Like, was that still in you, or was that something you sort of just stumbled upon later on after being burned out at Facebook?
Yeah, so I actually always wanted to be a YouTuber, like even when I was a kid, like middle school, but I just always kept it in the back, because I'm like, okay, what's more important is to get a stable job, right? And people say like, oh yeah, Asian parents, they tell you that, blah blah blah, or they force you to do that. But to be honest, I think it's the right thing. They're just trying to, like, my parents were just trying, they're really good parents, they're just trying to make me have a good stable life, because that's pretty important, right? And that's the only way they know how to help. Honestly, like, they know that they don't have the expertise to help you out, let's say your software engineering work, or like they don't know what advice to give you about YouTube, but they know that the only thing they can do is to help out any way they can. And the way that they can is to kind of tell you, hey, maybe getting a stable job is good, because from my experience, not having a stable job is fucking hard. And they're right?
I was gonna ask, because in the beginning when I asked the thing about that your life was carved out for you, because when you said that, I assumed that what you meant by that was that like it was starting from like birth, like your parents were like, you have to go to good schools and then you'll get like but then your answer was like more about the tech world, which makes a lot of sense, and it's so interesting to me, because I've heard that like I've heard that from a lot of, I don't know that many tech people, but I feel like the people that I do know in tech, they they do the exact same thing that you just said. Like they just like have their eyes
Yeah.
on the prize. Like, oh, we're gonna go to Google Fang, right? And which kind of to me reminds me a lot of like Asian kids when they grow up, because like all throughout your, not to stereotype, but like most Asian kids, like all throughout your life, you're like, we're just doing this so we get to Harvard, right? Like we're gonna get to Harvard,
Exactly.
we're gonna get to Stanford, we're gonna get to Yale, and then all of the and then I know so many Asian people that do get there to the Ivy Leagues, and then they're like, okay, now what? Like that was it, and then there is no, and then their parents are like, well, now you can do whatever you want, but then I feel like a lot of those people, they're like, I don't know what I want, because like my entire life, you were just forcing me to do this thing, and now I've done it. And that reminds me a lot of that. Like once you get into now you're saying, so many people that are in these like companies like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and then they're like, well, I'm not happy, right? So like did like the earlier part of your life, did it resemble that at all, or is that just like
not as much, because my parents weren't really like tiger parents or whatever. Like they were just happy that we got into university. Like me and my brother, I think we were the first ones to get into university, or college, as the Americans say it. But we went to university, and they were just pretty stoked about that. Like they didn't expect that we were gonna go to tech. Like they didn't even know what tech was and stuff like that. Right? They didn't force us to be doctors and stuff like that. So, and I wasn't like a really good student in elementary school, but slowly but surely I became a better student once it was more like math and less history and stuff like that, and less languages. But yeah, so no, I wasn't like really determined to go to Harvard and stuff like that. We just want to get into university. But once I got into university, I learned about this competitive tech world, right? Which is very similar. Like everyone is studying, instead of for the SATs, they're studying for Google interviews, because it's crackable, right? It's not like you need to be a interesting guy, well-rounded or anything. They don't care about that. It's as long as you can pass these logical tests. Like they're like, I don't even know why they test them, but like it's basically very like brain teasers, and then if you pass these brain teasers, you get the job, right? So everyone's just competing for that.
Right.
Oh, and I'm like excited right now, because I feel like I could learn a lot from you, and that is, as you mentioned, a lot of, because I have friends who work in tech. A lot of my high school peers work in tech, and burnout seems like it happens. There's archetypes of it now, where it's like your quintessential tech guy who burns out and then just becomes like a Burning Man person, and then like adopts a new personality and's like, yeah, I'm chill Zen yoga guy now. Fuck that. And maybe that's the term burnout. Maybe that's like that describes some of the feelings that I've felt, where I was like burned out by the pre-med track, and then now I'm like creatively burned out by the rat race of pursuing this creative thing. And what has helped you to prevent burnout? Have you experienced burnout? Because I feel like YouTube and tech, those are both spheres that people get fucking burnt out from independently.
Right. I think the number one thing that I did that helped me was to kind of detach myself from outcomes, right? Because like if you detach yourself from outcomes, then you won't get, disappointed from outcomes, right? And I think it's like when you mix the highs and the lows too closely together, that's when burnout happens. Because usually how it works is like, you work really hard because things are going great, so you work hard as hell, right? And then after you finish this sprint, you might not get the outcome that you wanted, and then that might be disappointing, or like or you just don't have any ideas anymore, and it's just you're just kind of floating. And then because you're floating, you're like, oh wait, I don't have that, that serotonin hit. I don't have that anymore. So now you're kind of like in withdrawal. So I think by detaching from the outcome, which is really hard, I'm still working on it. It's really, really difficult to detach yourself from outcome. But back then I used to look at, like for YouTube, like views, subscriber growth, everything, and that's hard, right? Because you care about so many of these metrics, it'll hurt you if you don't get the same metrics that you got before. So now I try to just say, all right, just try to make something that you're proud of, inherently that you're proud of, and then post it, and then that's it. If you're proud of it, at least you're proud of it. Don't think about the other stuff. The other stuff is only a bonus. right?
Yeah.
And then I think that's what has helped me. But
That's such a good point.
We'll see if it lasts.
Well, this is such a good point, I feel like, and I just want to stress it because you're a YouTuber, you know, that's like your career, and that's like the internet is like your thing. But I think that's a really important point for anyone that uses social media, because they know, even though no matter who you are, if you have 200 followers and you're posting pictures of your cats, I think they know what you're talking about. Like, oh, I posted this picture of my cat and 60 people liked it, and this week 20 people like it, and like that sort of like, it's like this rearrangement of like, I think those emotions that we used to have living in like a real society where like people like me, people don't. It's like now put on this like digital interface where that's like giving you like serotonin and like little hits. And I feel like that's like important. I think that's an important thing that you just said for anyone, like even if you're not like a YouTuber with millions of subscribers, like you have to like realize that when you're putting stuff in front of people, you have to just do it for yourself, not for the numbers, because that's when it starts to really fuck with you, you know? That's how I feel.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of our listeners are Asian American, and as you can imagine, a lot of Asian Americans work in tech. You've seen it. And so we have listeners who are also in the tech industry, and Youngmi and I receive messages from them where, you know, they say they enjoy our podcast because it provides like a creative outlet for them, or they'll express their frustrations with working in tech and how like meaningless it all feels, or they ask us about how we got into stand-up because they have these aspirations of doing something more creative because they do feel burnt out, like working in tech, or unfulfilled. And in your case, like you've done it, you've done that leap, you're doing both successfully. Like, do you have any advice or for people who might be feeling this way, where if you are at a thing, like at a job, it doesn't have to be in tech, but maybe you're like in ad sales or something, and you're kind of like, fuck, I feel unfulfilled by this, but I want to do something more creative. Like, I don't even know where to begin.
The easiest way to do it is to do it alongside your work. But the problem is usually after you're done work, you're tired as shit. You don't want to do anything. You're just at home, right? And this is where it gets hard, because for me, I'm lucky I'm in tech, where you could just like ease up on the work, right? Because I would say you only have a limited amount of like willpower energy or like creative energy in a day. So if work sucks it out from you, then there's really nothing you can do. So one thing I try to like reframe my mind around is like, try to remember that don't let like the company own you, right? Because a lot of people work as if like, oh yeah, I work for this company, so I have to do this for the company. But rather try to frame it in terms of like, oh, this company is my stepping stone to something else. I'm using this company, right? That's kind of how I thought about it in the beginning, where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just using Facebook so that I could fund my YouTube stuff, or that I could do my other stuff without fear of getting like going bankrupt, or without fear of going broke, right? Because I have another job, right? So the way that I thought about it is like, oh, I'm using my company, you know, rather than you thinking about, oh yeah, the company's hiring you, so you must do X, Y, Z, right? There is a risk to that because, you know, of course, if you don't perform well, you might lose your job, et cetera, et cetera. So it's always a balance, and it really depends on your specific case.
Right.
But you'd be surprised how much you can step back and still have your job. You know, yes, you will be making some sacrifices. Maybe you won't. maybe you won't get promoted as fast as your friends and stuff like that. And it does hurt, because in the beginning, when I used to do YouTube, I was like, dude, why the hell am I spending so much time on YouTube? And I could have used that time for my own work, and I could have gotten promoted as fast as my friends and make way more money, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So there is some sort of sacrifice there. But for me, at least, I just couldn't help myself but make videos, because whenever I watch TV, I'm just like, oh goddamn, I wish I could make that. I'm not gonna make that. I'm gonna make something really shitty, you know, on YouTube. But it's still closer to what I want to do. So I just couldn't help myself. Like, honestly, financially, it did not make sense for me to do YouTube, especially in the beginning. I didn't even know there was a space for a tech YouTuber, right? But I just did it because I loved making it. So it was easier for me to make that decision. But for someone who's like, well, I had a lot of friends who wanted to do YouTube, same thing as me. He's like, oh, I'm a product manager. Let me talk about product management on YouTube, right? and then they do like 4 videos max, and then they're like, oh, it's like, fuck that, I'm not doing that.
Your product manager friends, they make 4 videos and then they're like, fuck that, this isn't for me.
Yep.
Like, what should they have done then? Do you know?
Oh yeah, so that's the thing.
Improv.
I think they tried to get on
kidding.
YouTube, like for the wrong reason. That's why, because they don't even love it. They don't even love making videos. So if you don't love it, there's no way you could balance your work and that,
Right.
because it's supposed to give you more energy.
Right.
You're supposed to be like
drive you to
driven to
do
do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, right.
Fun.
You know,
It's supposed to be
but that's very
fun.
YouTube specific. Exactly. I don't see other people like doing, let's say, like doing stand up and then burning out on stand up, because like usually when you choose stand up, you know, it's because they actually love stand up. YouTube has a different connotation because they think YouTube will make them a lot of money, like a side hustle.
So you're doing it for
You know,
the
it's
wrong
part of
reasons.
these like drop shipping side hustle.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
That's a really good point.
If you actually love it, like naturally, you should be
And
driven to it, driven by it.
and you should be able to just. It shouldn't. You shouldn't feel like you're dreading it, like making a. It should be like the thing that you're looking forward to after work. You're like, you know, you can just do a lot less work at work and no one will notice. That was like, you could just try.
Yeah, it's kind of true though.
No, I mean,
No one will notice.
honestly, it's so. But all of this advice is so helpful, and a lot of it is stuff that I'm hearing it at the right time too, because even with this podcast, if I'm being completely honest, there are new variables that are introduced to it that have been impacting my like enjoyment of it, and that is, you know, no one told us to do it. We were just driven by it. We love making this podcast, but now I feel like I chose this creative thing, but at times I feel like I'm just another cog in the corporate machine, because I'm thinking about like ad sales, what are the impressions, like how many downloads am I getting? And that's the type of stuff when I start thinking about, I'm like, okay, this is draining me. And because it's like not meeting certain expectations, or now that there's money involved and there's like numbers and quantitative metrics tied to it, that's like stressing me out.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt, but can I just say, I know this is, we're interviewing Jonathan and I want to get back to it, but I've noticed that with you, Brian, and I wanted to say, because I feel like Brian has a tendency to take on the businessy stuff in our relationship, and he takes on a lot more than I do. And I was sensing a little bit like Brian was getting like overwhelmed, and I was like worried that this is gonna start being this very not fun thing for Brian, where I'm just like, I show up.
I started wearing suits.
I just show up and I'm gonna talk about my date last week where I farted, or I don't, and then like Brian's like, we have to sell and I was like, I was a little concerned about that, Brian. I have to say, is that what's really stressing you out about it? Are we getting to the truth now?
It is like assuring to hear from you, Jonathan, like, because I think you have a good head on your shoulders and have a way to, and I don't know if you would have come to these conclusions on how to like balance yourself from this burnout if you didn't have these experiences in both tech and doing like the rat race of being like a creative doing YouTube. And I've found myself, I wish I had met you in my young 20s when I was working my like corporate job, and I stressed so much, like, because I experienced so much anguish because of my manager, and I wish I had that reminder of being like, this is a stepping stone. They don't own, this isn't my life. Like,
Yeah.
And sorry.
Everything I say is very theoretical though. That's the problem. Like, it's a lot harder in practice, and also I didn't even mention like the elephant in the room, which is like money and like financial security, right?
I'm so glad.
I mean, I could say, like, honestly, I'm a hypocrite because I could say that because like I'm financially secure now, like with like my job or whatever in YouTube. That's why it's way easier for me to say no to things, right?
Yeah.
Because that was the other point too. It's like, how do you prevent burnout? It's okay. Well, whenever there's a project that's giving you stress, fuck it, just drop it.
Yeah.
Like even if you worked a lot on it, fuck it, just drop it. But like, you can't really do that if, for example, the work is paying you like a salary and you need that salary to like pay rent and stuff.
Yep.
That's not gonna work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't risk losing your job.
I'm really glad you said that.
So that's the problem.
I'm glad
So that's the big problem.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, because a lot of people, for you were like bound by your career, like, oh, I want to like reach these like stepping stones in my career. But for a lot of people that have similar issues, their problem with like having to follow the rat race or having their life carved out for them is that their financial support are their parents. And so it's like, yeah, maybe I don't want to work at Google or whatever, but this is what my parents want me to do, and I need their money. And it's very hard to, if you don't have the financial option to not do that, you just can't do it, you know? Like, and like no one, very rarely is someone going to be like, I have a secure pathway to a career in school, and I'm going to say no to that. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you don't have the money.
Yeah. My brother, he's like he would, so he's like, I don't know, like a wealthy man or whatever. But he would always tell me, you know, okay, he's a wealthy man. Yeah, he would give me this advice to me. He's like, hey man, just get rich quick. that was the advice I would give. I'm like, okay, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Like, of course. You know, but like, I mean, I guess if I, you know, decipher it for him, I'm sure that's not what he meant, but if I decipher it, I think what he meant was like, I guess when you're young and you do have energy and you could get like a soulless, high-paying job, maybe it's the right thing to do if you can like just spend a few years doing it, and then you'll feel financial security. Because once you feel that financial security, you won't ever make decisions based on like money, for example. And because you don't make decisions based on money, you probably are going to choose something you actually enjoy doing. And if you choose something that you actually enjoy doing, you're probably going to be really good at it. And then if you're really good at it, you will be rewarded by it anyways. You know. You know, I mean, like.
Damn, Jonathan with the cold hard facts that my parents would love to sponsor.
I don't know. I feel like I'm like unsure about that, because I feel like that's a very popular sentiment from like Asian parents. Like, no, what we're trying to do is make sure you have a lot of money, and then you can do what you want. But what I find is like, if you fall into this line of like, you know, like the carved out life, like whether it's school or going into tech or whatever, what ends up happening is you just fall into the status quo, and you keep falling in harder and harder and harder and harder. And like by the time you're like 40 and you're wealthy, to like me looking at somebody that's like 40 and like in tech and wealthy, I'm like, wow, you're so wealthy and set up. But it's like you almost get entangled more in this life of like following the path.
That's 100%.
And then at that point, when you're like, you're a millionaire and you're 40, you're not gonna break away and be like, I'm gonna do stand up. You know what I mean? Like it becomes almost harder. I don't know. Maybe that's like, maybe I'm just like, that's a generalization too. But like, you know,
honestly, I see parallels between both you and Jonathan in that you making your stand-up jokes on me about being a single mother has helped you conceptualize, oh, I'm actually really happy with how my life has turned out to this point. Like society has told me that I shouldn't be, but this is honestly great. And it sounds that these YouTube videos for you, like whether because it's a creative outlet for you, it helps you sort of like detach yourself and evaluate where you are at life right now. And like it has that similar function that it does for Young Me as the stand-up jokes. And I think that,
because for the longest time, I always had doubts about whether it's the right thing to do YouTube, because it is very time consuming, you know, and taking it away from my career. And when I used to compare myself to other people who, you know, followed the path, I was way behind in everything, right? But now I've grown to accept, like, wait, no, this makes me happy. You know, this is what I want. This is the balance that I really enjoy doing, right? And I think it did help, like me doing these YouTube things, and like, I don't know, seeing people saying like, oh yeah, I love your videos, like it really impacted me. I was like, okay, well, I think this is really cool.
Such a fascinating conversation, because I feel like for me, like I'm very aware of the social pressure of not fitting in and stuff like that. But for me, I think what helped me was that I was at such a rock bottom. Like I was like so not what an Asian parent would want. I was like, can't fuck up any more than this. You know what I mean? So I was like, like that, which helped me. Like as an outsider that does not know much about it, what I've noticed is that there's so many Asian YouTubers and content creators that are very, very popular and have huge followings. And like my assumption is like they are like entertainers for the most part. And my assumption was always that like the traditional pathway to becoming an entertainer in America is like very like, it's an industry that's like controlled by, you know, like everything in America, like like racism. It's always like white people. Like all the actors are white. We all know this. Like Hollywood is just white actors, and the producers are white, and the people in power are white, and they have to look a certain way. They have to be very like skinny or look, like not gay or not marginalized at all. And so my assumption was always that like Asian, like young people or anybody, if they're setting out to become an entertainer, they would just like sort of go the YouTube route because it's very independent and they can just create whatever they want and like gain their own following. And I think that the internet has changed the industry so much that now there's so much of a following and viewership, like for people like you and other Asian content creators, that it's shaped the industry itself, and Hollywood has had to like make room for marginalized communities. But what I find really problematic is that you hear like there's still so much respect for entertainers that go that like set route of like becoming an actor and like making it in Hollywood and then winning a Oscar. Like that is the like still like the creme de la creme. And if they talk about like a content creator or YouTuber, it's very like condescending, and they're almost like, well, it's not like a legitimate artist or a legitimate actor. And I feel like that is inherently like super racist and classist, because it's like, okay, here's a bunch of us that were like, we're too poor or we're too Asian or we're too black or we're too gay to get into Hollywood, so we're gonna do it on our own. And then like Hollywood kind of like poo-poos on it. Like what? That's like my theory about YouTube. Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that's like a valid thought, or what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, my hope is that Hollywood is getting better, right? Yeah. Like we at least we got like a Chinese superhero now, so that's cool.
Yeah.
But yes, I do think that it seems like there are more Asians on YouTube than traditional media, and I think that is true. But I think that's a good thing, because YouTube is like it's a meritocracy, right? There's no gatekeeping for YouTube. Anyone can post videos, right? It really doesn't matter. The only person who's gatekeeping or like who's judging you if you're worthy of being on YouTube is the viewers, right? So because of that, there's literally no one like blocking you from doing it, which is why I think in the beginning, at least in the past, we see a lot of Asian Americans. It's because that's the only platform where they can have their voice heard, right? Yeah. Because if you can't get an acting job and stuff like that, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it myself, put it on YouTube, right? And with technology, it became a lot easier to make videos now, which is great. And the other thing, aside from being a meritocracy, is also a discovery platform. It's being able to connect niches, right? Like for example, making videos about product management. Yeah. Like, how are you supposed to, like, they're not gonna make a movie about that, right? they're not gonna make a TV show on HBO or maybe Netflix on that.
19 million
right?
views.
coming to theaters soon. Just following up on this.
Just following up on this. As per my last email. So there's no mainstream audience for that, but there is a niche. Yeah. And the great thing about YouTube is they can connect niche. And I guess back then, being Asian is kind of a niche, right? Yeah. Because, you don't see Asian in popular media because they don't think it sells, right? And the thing about production companies or like traditional media, I'm not sure, but people just hire people who are like them, even if they didn't mean it, right? From my experience, if you hire a production company or cinematographer or whatever, and you do well with them, then you're going to hire them again, just because, you don't want to hire another person just in case. Right. And then because of that, it slowly becomes like homogenous and everyone's white and everyone's male and stuff like that, right? But I believe it's slowly changing, hopefully. But the YouTube thing is, the great thing is that it's able to connect viewers to niches. And because of that, they can actually garner a large audience, quote unquote, because compared to TV, I guess it's still not super mainstream, right? So I think that's why we see a lot of Asians in YouTube, which is great, because YouTube is slowly becoming, I wouldn't say respected, but at least like well known. Like for example, YouTubers. I mean, kids want to be YouTubers; they don't want to be actors anymore. Yeah. Right. According to some
like my
statistic,
7-year-old son right now is Do you hear him watching YouTube? He watches like streamers on YouTube all day.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And oh my God, he started doing this thing where he asked to start a YouTube channel. And then I was like, okay, so I would just like turn the phone on and he'd be like, hey gamers. Like he's talking to an audience. He's like, "Hey gamers," and I'm like,
That is amazing.
Oh my god.
oh, and then did I
man.
tell
Yeah.
you, Brian? Did I tell you I was at the playground and I saw like it was my 7-year-old and there was like a bunch of 10-year-old boys and they were playing this game called Logan Paul Finds the Dead Body and somebody had to pretend to be the
what the-
dead body.
Oh
Oh
my
my.
god.
Oh my god, that's terrible.
So that's what kids are doing now. Just to let you know.
Oh wow. Jonathan, is YouTube? Do you also see YouTube as a stepping stone for something bigger for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I want to be a film director eventually. I think that's what I want to do. I mean, it's very possible that once I do it, I'm like, it's not for me. Let's go back to
That's like
product
Brian.
management or something.
You're gonna be like, I want to be a doctor.
Yeah, but yeah. So for me, YouTube is a stepping stone because I do think like, imagine if you want to make a Netflix show. I do think that if you have a YouTube channel, you can say like, oh, well, I can guarantee that there's some audience,
Right.
Or like that there's someone that wants to watch it,
Totally.
like my short film or something like that. So I think it is a stepping stone, but it's also possible that I'll never go to the traditional route because it's I just don't have a traditional background and maybe I just don't have the skills. But like there are ways to make it work. Like YouTube, you can monetize on YouTube enough such that the cost of making your short film, you can recoup it from YouTube merch, blah, 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 and stuff like that. So it's also like a business savviness thing, right? You could turn YouTube into something that's profitable.
Right.
Just like how TV was back then, right? Like, I guess my guess is TV back then wasn't as respected as films. And that's the same thing now. It's like in traditional media, they don't really respect YouTubers. But if in the end, you start to make really good content, you put on YouTube for free, but you monetize well and you're sustainable, then advertisers will start coming and say like, wait a minute, why don't, like, this guy's getting 10 million views and an ad rate, like the ad rate
No one is
so
watching
low,
our
like,
show Virgin River on NBC.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think sooner or later, YouTube might be a platform to watch free content,
Virgin
but
River.
it's still, yeah. There is a fear though in my mind that maybe one day the people from Virgin River will bring their talent and their writing skills to YouTube, which might push away a lot of us. And the only way for us to survive is to keep on being in the niches that don't make that much money, right?
Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. It was like so insightful, and I
Thanks for
personally
having me.
learned a lot. But before you go, we want to ask you a question that we ask all of our listeners. We want to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, what is something that you're proud of?
Ooh, interesting. Well, I mean, I'm proud of many things. I'm a narcissist. You know how like I get nervous a little bit? There's a part of me that's like, dude, man, I'm looking really good. Like, I don't know, I'm looking at my own feed right now. I'm like,
Wow,
my hair's
truly
kinda
the
on point
most.
and stuff.
We're proud of you for being the most honest in answering this question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a YouTuber. What do you expect, man? Of course I'm a narcissist. I put my videos online for millions of people to watch. But I mean, I guess like what I'm proud of, I am proud of like this space that I created for myself, and kind of like this own job, or like this own balance of jobs that I made for myself, right? Because a lot of people think I'm super busy, and like, oh my god, you must be so stressed and stuff. But like, no, I'm not. And I think that's that's the thing I'm most proud of, is being able to create the mental space where I could do this sustainably and happily. Yeah, I think that's I'm pretty proud of that. Yeah.
So you're proud of like the fact that you're doing so much. You are doing your day job and like your creative job, but you also are doing it at a pace that's like comfortable for you. Is that
Exactly?
that's like
Yeah.
such a
like
good,
I don't feel stressed that much.
that is
Mhm.
such
Yeah.
a good point, because I feel like that's really important. Yeah.
Because there are a lot of YouTubers that are growing way faster than me, and stuff like that. But being okay with that, I think that's the thing I'm proud of the most. Being okay with yourself, being okay with whatever outcome that's gonna happen. Just remembering that it's lame, but it's the journey that's worth. Or like, what's that quote? It's the journey that matters, not the destination. So, yeah.
And the pacing
it's-
I feel like the pacing is important, because I feel like, sorry, like obviously you know way more than I do, but like with things like YouTube, there is like room to grow really rapidly, but that must take a really big toll on your mental health. So I feel like you're very smart to like pace yourself, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds sad, but you kind of have to like dampen your emotions, because when you go viral, it's a huge serotonin hit, right? And then after you finish going viral, it's like you're kind of on a withdrawal process. So from now on, it's like whenever something really happy or like something really good happens, I'm like, just remember it's temporary, right? And if something really sad happens, I'm also like, oh, don't worry, it's temporary, right? So, but you can still enjoy your success. You can still enjoy your viralness or whatever. But just remember that, like, oh, everything's temporary. Enjoy it, you know. Live in it. Don't dwell on the past. Don't think about the future too much. Live in the present. Stuff like that. Yeah.
That's so great.
So fascinating. It's such a like
Thank you.
window into like a world. Like I just feel like everyone at this point in 2021 has a taste of it, you know, like because we're all extremely online, but like for it to be like your livelihood, I think that's like such a interesting like perspective. Well, thank you for joining us. That was such an interesting conversation.
It's
Where
fun.
can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, so I mean, they could just type Joma, Joma, on YouTube, and they'll find both my channels. The tech channel is very heavily geared towards techies, like programmers, but Joma in NYC, it's more geared towards like anyone. So it's lifestyle stuff. So
Awesome. And are you on Instagram or active on Instagram?
Oh
at
yeah,
all?
Instagram. So it's Joma Oppa, JOMAOPPA. I'm not Korean, in case anyone asks, but yeah.
Awesome. And what about you, Youngmi?
Instagram and Twitter at YMMayor, and then my TikTok is YoungMeMayor. How about you, Brian?
You guys can find me on socials at It's Brian Park, and follow our Feeling Asian podcast on Instagram at Feeling Asian Podcast, and we have a YouTube channel now. YouTube.com/Feeling
Watch out, Joma.
Asian.
I know. I've actually subscribed to it.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, because I'm more of a visual
Yeah.
person. I like to watch podcasts, so I'm really glad you guys are doing it.
Wow. Well, you
Great.
better watch out. We have one of our videos has 396 views.
Watch out.
Damn.
I know.
Damn.
We just unlocked the ability to do a custom URL, so we got over 100 subscribers. So YouTube, watch out for us.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And one last shout out to our audio engineer for this podcast, Sarah Pack. If you are in need of an incredible audio engineer for your projects, please hit her up on Instagram at im_PAKT. That's at impact. And once again, Jonathan, thanks for doing the podcast. And listeners, thank you again. And that's it.
Woo.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.